Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Bryson here with Glory Apologetics, and today we are going to be starting a brand new series. And today, the series we're going to be starting is, Does Jesus claim to be God in the New Testament? Now, this might seem like an obvious answer, an obvious topic to a lot of Christians. However, there are some religions, such as like Muslims, who will say that in the New Testament, Jesus doesn't really claim to be God. And so we're going to be starting the new series today to go over different scriptures and different points where Jesus very clearly claims to be God, that we can combat these claims. And so today, the first claim we're going to go over is in Mark chapter 14, verses 61 through 64. Now, I do also want to note that this specific story of what happens here is also paralleled in Matthew 26, chapter 26, verse 64, and also Luke chapter 22, verses 69 and 70. So, and the other verses are the context of it around those two, but those are the two chapters where you'll find the story. Now, the reason that I want to stick with Mark here is because the same people who claim that Jesus, doesn't claim to be God in the New Testament are the same people who will say that as time goes on and as the Gospels and the other books of the New Testament were progressively written, that as time goes on, the follower of Christ would deify him more. So they'll say, for instance, like in John, you'll see more seemingly obvious statements like, not from Jesus himself, but like with John 1, where the Word was with God and the Word was God and the Word became flesh, right? So in these passages, they'll say that's not Jesus speaking, but John, as time, because he was the last one written, he is trying to deify Christ when Christ didn't deify himself. So because Mark was the first gospel written, that's where I want to go to for this claim. Because if you can just show that in Mark, Jesus was undoubtedly 100% claiming to be God, claiming to be divine, then it doesn't matter if there's more or less of other people deifying him in John seemingly, because as long as Jesus claims to be God in Mark, and that's the first one written, then that claim has to go out the window and doesn't matter anymore. So we're going to start in Mark chapter 14, verses 61 through 64. And the context of this is after Jesus has been arrested, and he's on trial before the high priest, okay? Him being the high priest is important in this matter, right? Because he is the man who's supposed to be the closest to God, the most familiar and in line with the scriptures, who knows the most about this, okay? So right here, we're going to start in verse 61, and it says, But he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man, right here, the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tore his garments and said, What further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. That's important. You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him, deserving death. Why is this significant? Well, because right here, this Son of Man claim, right? This is a claim of divinity. Now, people who are skeptics and criticisms, they'll try to say that you have other people in the Old Testament referred to as a son of man, right? Ezekiel, which is just a general term for saying you are the son of a man, okay? That's what they're saying. But there is something very important here that Jesus is claiming that is distinct from any other person who's known to be a son of man in the Old Testament. Jesus says not only is he the Son of Man, he's coming with the clouds of heaven. So now let's go right here to Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. It says, and this is Daniel's prophetic vision. He says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. Okay, so he's not only just like a son of man, he's a son of man who's coming with the clouds of heaven. And he was presented, he came before the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom is one that shall not be destroyed. So this is the Son of Man who Jesus is claiming. And once again, we know that this is the Son of Man that Jesus is claiming to be, because he specifically says not only is he the Son of Man, he's the Son of Man who's seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. This is a direct correlation to this prophecy right here. And so we see that Jesus is claiming to be the king of an everlasting kingdom. Everlasting means it has no beginning, no end. It's eternal. Jesus is our eternal king, which will never pass away, and it will never be destroyed. And every people's, nations, and language will serve Jesus. That's what he's saying. He's saying that we are going to serve him forever, and that he is a king forever. If that ain't a claim to be divine, I don't know what to tell you. And how can we argue this, right? How do we know if we don't need further evidence? How do we know that this is what Jesus is saying? Well, maybe because the high priest tore his garments and called it blasphemy. The high priest is somebody who knows the scriptures. So one thing we have to remember when people want to make critiques like, why wouldn't Jesus just say, I am God? I am God. What you have to realize is these were Jews in the first century. When Jesus makes his claims to be God, what he's saying right here to the Jews is the equivalent of us saying, I am God. That's the same. When he makes this claim, there's not a single doubt, which is why he says, what more witnesses do we need? We don't need anyone else. We don't need anyone else to give a testimony to say that Jesus is committing blasphemy, because he is claiming it right here. So to them, it is that obvious that that's exactly what Jesus is doing. And so now I want to get to this other part at the right hand, because Jesus also says he's the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of power. So now let's go down to Psalm 110, where where David is writing a psalm about what happens and who's at the right hand of power. Okay, so in Psalm 110, it says, the Lord says to my Lord. Okay, so you have two Lords here. All right, so the Lord is saying to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Okay, so this person, David's Lord, is going to rule with a scepter, right? The scepter is a sign, as a symbol of a king, and he's going to rule in the midst of his enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. From the womb of the morning and the dew of your youth will be yours. The Lord has sworn, and you will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand, and he will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. So now not only do we have Jesus claiming to be a king forever, and he has a kingdom that's going to last forever, he's also a priest forever. So he's a priest king forever, which is after the order of Melchizedek, which is also what he was when you go in the Old Testament in Genesis, and you can go and reference those. And where I want to hit on with Psalms 110 right here is this verse 5. The Lord is at your right hand. So in verse 5 right here, this Lord, this person, is who is at the right hand. It's not the one who's saying that the person is the right hand up. The Lord here in verse 5 is the one who's on the right hand. Why is this such a big deal? Why is this so important? Because this word used right here in verse 5 is Adonai. It's Strong's number 136. This is important because this word is only ever used to describe God in the Old Testament. Nothing else. You have different variations like Adonai or Adon. You have different variations. There are textual differences. So there are different variations of the same root word that are also used to describe humans, but this specific variation is only ever used to describe God. So the one who is sitting at the right hand is the one who is called God. Adonai. Strong's 136. You can verify that and look that up and fact check me if you want to. So right here, this makes all the more sense. If you were a Jew in the first century, if you know the scriptures, you know the prophet Daniel, and you know the Psalms of David, you know all of these scriptures, when you hear this man, when you hear Jesus saying this statement, there's not a doubt in your mind of what about he's claiming to be. He is claiming to be God. Point blank, period. Jesus in Mark chapter 14, verses 61 through 64 is claiming to be God because we can go to the scripture the same way the Jews knew it. See, where we can go and look at it, they knew the high priest knew this thing by heart. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to look, oh, what does this mean? Okay, he said he was the Son of Man. I got to see what that means real quick. No, he knew. That's why he said he's blasphemy. We don't need nobody else to tell us. We don't need no other witnesses. We can kill this man right here. Have you heard this? And they condemned him, deserving death. So right here, guys, this is a clear example, but we're going to keep going with this. We're going to keep doing more and more of these. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss. I really do love this topic. So if y'all want to see more of it, like and comment. If there's any other specific, if there's any other examples that you specifically want to cover, any questions that you have, leave them down in the comments. Let me know, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a blessed rest of your day. Peace.